There was a moment inside that courtroom that the entire internet lost its mind over. Millions of views, thousands of reaction videos, comment sections that went absolutely nuclear. And every single person who reacted to the wrong thing. They saw an expression, they saw body language, they saw the drama. What they did not see, that not one mainstream outlet bothered to explain, was what was actually happening legally in that exact moment. And I'm going to tell you today that the legal reality underneath that viral second is 10 times more significant than anything the reaction videos captured. Today, on this channel, we go beneath the surface. We went where the cameras didn't. If this kind of deep dive analysis is what you've been looking for, the kind that actually explains what you're watching instead of just reacting to it, then you are in the right place. Hit that like button right now and subscribe to Jenny Exposes, because this channel is where moments finally get their meaning. Let's start with something that most people don't think about: how a courtroom moment actually becomes a viral moment. Because it doesn't just happen, there is a pipeline. And understanding that pipeline is the first step to understanding why the public's reaction to this specific moment was so completely disconnected from what was actually occurring. Legal proceedings, particularly high-profile family proceedings, are controlled environments. There are rules about what can be recorded, what can be published, and what can be shared. But information escapes. It always does. It escapes through sketch artists who sit in the gallery and draw what they see. It escapes through witness accounts of people who were present and describe what happened to someone who wasn't. It escapes through attorney statements given on courthouse steps to cameras that have been waiting since 6 in the morning. It escapes through court documents that become public record and get uploaded at 2 in the morning by someone who wasn't even supposed to be awake. And by the time any fragment of a legal proceeding reaches you, sitting at home, watching a 15-second clip on your phone, that fragment has traveled through an entire machine. It has been described, interpreted, clipped, captioned, reacted to again, and finally delivered to your screen, stripped of almost everything that made it meaningful in the first place. You are receiving a shadow of a moment. And the shadow is the part that went viral. This is not anyone's fault specifically. This is how information moves in the current media environment. But it creates a very specific problem when the moment in question involves real people inside a real legal process, fighting over real outcomes that will shape the rest of their real lives. The gap between what the public saw and what was actually happening in that room is not a minor distinction. It is the entire story. Now let's talk about Kendra. Because before we get into the legal mechanics, before we get into the strategy and the chess moves and the courtroom architecture, we have to acknowledge who we are actually talking about. Kendra Duggar entered public consciousness as part of the Duggar universe, a world that was carefully curated, carefully managed, and carefully presented to an audience that believed they were being given access to something real: the show, the family image, the story that was being told about who these people were and how they lived. And then, as it does, reality reasserted itself. And Kendra found herself inside a legal process, not a television process, not a curated narrative, a real proceeding with real stakes, where the goal was not to appear a certain way for a camera, but to be genuinely seen as a full human being, with a documented experience, with a complex story that could not be reduced to a highlight reel or a family photo. Here is the painful irony. The moment that escaped into public consciousness from that proceeding, the moment that went viral, did not help the public see her more fully. It did the opposite. It reduced her. It took a woman who was inside a process specifically designed to witness her experience in full, and it turned her into a reaction GIF. The internet did not see Kendra. The internet saw a clip. And then it reacted to the clip as though the clip was the story. This is a specific form of public erasure. And it is worth naming before we go any further, because everything that follows, every piece of legal analysis, every theory, every breakdown exists inside the human context of a real person trying to be seen and being reduced instead. Now, let's talk about what the internet actually saw, the moment that circulated, the moment that generated millions of views and thousands of comments and an entire cycle of reaction content. What people saw in various forms, through various sources, was a moment of visible reaction from the opposing counsel. A pause, a particular kind of stillness, the kind of stillness that does not read as calm. It reads as someone recalibrating, someone who is prepared for a certain version of the proceeding and suddenly found themselves inside a different version. The expression that went with that stillness was the thing that launched 1,000 screenshots. People read into it. They analyzed it. They assigned meaning to it based on what they already believed about the people involved, about the case, about the Duggar family broadly. The dominant interpretation that emerged, the one that the mainstream coverage settled on, the one that most reaction videos echoed, was that this was a moment of emotional exposure, that someone had been caught, that the drama was personal, emotional, human, that what you were seeing on that attorney's face was the face of someone whose client had just been revealed. That interpretation is not wrong, exactly, but it is so incomplete that it functions as a misdirection. Here is what was actually happening. What the public saw as a spontaneous moment of emotional drama was in reality the visible surface effect of a legal maneuver, a deliberate, carefully constructed strategic move that one attorney had been building toward, not for minutes, not for hours, but for weeks. And the reaction that went viral? That reaction was not incidental to the strategy. That reaction was part of the goal. Let me explain what I mean by that, because this is the part that changes how you understand everything you saw. In legal proceedings, particularly in the kind of family law proceedings relevant to this case, the introduction of evidence is not simply a mechanical act, it is a communicative act. When an attorney introduces a piece of evidence, they are not just saying to the judge, "Here is a fact." They are saying something to opposing counsel. They are saying something to any observers in the room. And in high-profile cases, through the pipeline we described earlier, they are eventually saying something to the public. A skilled attorney and the attorney working on behalf of Kendra in this proceeding demonstrated clear skill and understands that the moment of introduction is itself a message. The timing of the introduction, the manner of the introduction, the specific language used to frame the introduction. All of it is intentional. All of it is designed to produce a specific effect. And the specific effect that was produced in this moment, that visible recalibration, that particular stillness, that expression, was not an accident. It was the confirmation that the move had landed exactly as intended. Here is the theory, and I want to be clear that this is an analysis built on available information, on an understanding of how these proceedings work, and on what can be reasonably inferred from what escaped into the public record. This is not inside information. This is what the legal context actually points toward when you look at it carefully. The viral moment was engineered, not in a deceptive way, not in a manipulative way, in a strategic way, which is exactly what legal representation is supposed to be. The attorney representing Kendra had in their possession a piece of evidence. We'll get to what that evidence likely was in a moment that they had held, deliberately. They had not introduced it early. They had not used it to score a minor point in a preliminary hearing. They had waited. They had submitted it through proper procedural channels weeks before, in a way that gave opposing counsel technical notice without giving them a meaningful opportunity to prepare a counter-strategy. And then, at the precise moment when its introduction would be most legally devastating and most strategically visible, they played it. That pause, that specific pause that the internet saw and reacted to, was the sound of opposing counsel understanding what had just happened to them. Understanding that the evidence they were looking at had been sitting in their discovery materials for 3 weeks. Understanding that they had not prepared for it adequately. Understanding that the judge had just heard it, or seen it, or been made aware of it, and that there was no procedural move available to undo that. The drama the public saw was real, but the drama was not the story. The story was the 3 weeks before it. The story was the decision to wait. The story was the architecture of the reveal, the way it was constructed to land with maximum force at maximum impact. The internet saw the explosion. It missed the device that caused it. And this matters beyond the mechanics of one case, because of what it tells us about how legal strategy actually works at this level. Most people carry a mental model of courtroom proceedings that comes from television, from legal dramas where the dramatic moment is its own reward, where a witness breaks down on the stand and the camera holds on their face and the music swells. Real legal proceedings do not work that way. In real proceedings, the dramatic moment when it occurs is almost always the result of preparation that began long before anyone set foot in a courtroom. The drama is the evidence of the strategy, not the strategy itself. What Kendra's legal team demonstrated in this moment was an understanding of that principle that the opposing side clearly did not match. They built toward something. They were patient. They waited for the right moment. And when the moment came, they executed, and the execution was so clean, so precisely timed, that even the fallout from it was controlled. Even the viral moment that escaped into public consciousness served their narrative rather than undermining it. That is not luck. That is preparation at a level that deserves to be recognized and understood. Now, the question that I know has been sitting in the back of your mind since I mentioned it: what was the evidence? What did that recording contain? Because that is the question that nobody in the mainstream coverage stopped long enough to ask. Everyone reacted to the moment. Nobody asked what created the moment. Nobody traced it back to its source. And the source of the actual substance of what was introduced is where the real story lives. Now, I have to be honest with you here, because honesty is the foundation of why this channel exists. I do not have access to sealed court documents. I am not inside that courtroom, and I will not pretend to know with certainty what was on that recording, because that would be exactly the kind of irresponsible speculation that the mainstream coverage already drowned this case in. That is not what we do here. What I can do, and what I think is actually more useful, is walk you through the categories of evidence that carry the most legal weight in proceedings of this nature. Because when you understand what types of evidence are most significant in family law cases at this level, you can make your own informed assessment of what was likely introduced. And I think your informed assessment, built on actual legal understanding, is going to be far more accurate than anything the reaction videos offered you. So let's go through them. The first category, and this is the one that tends to carry the heaviest weight in family proceedings, is recorded communication that documents behavioral patterns over time. Not a single conversation, not an isolated incident, a pattern. Courts in family law matters are not primarily interested in what happened once. They are interested in what happened consistently. A single recording of a single conversation can be explained away. A series of recordings that establish a recurring dynamic, a way of speaking, a way of responding, a way of behaving, when someone believes they are not being formally observed, that is a different kind of evidence entirely. That kind of evidence does not just document an incident, it documents a character. It documents who someone is when they are not performing. If what was introduced fell into this category, the implications for the proceeding would have been significant. Because character evidence in family proceedings, evidence that speaks to who someone is in private, in moments of stress, in moments of conflict, directly informs the judgments that courts are asked to make about things like environment, safety, and long-term well-being. The second category is voicemail and written communication evidence that establishes the communication dynamic between parties. This is subtler than the first category, but often equally powerful. The way two people communicate, or fail to communicate, tells a court something important about the nature of the relationship and about the claims each party is making. If one party has consistently characterized the relationship one way in public and in testimony, and the voicemails and messages document something different, then the gap between those two versions becomes the evidence. The inconsistency itself becomes the argument. This is why attorneys advise their clients, in any legal proceeding, to be exceptionally careful about every communication they generate. Because every text message, every voicemail, every email is potentially a document that will one day be read by a judge. People who understand this behave accordingly. People who do not, or who believe that their communications will never surface, sometimes generate documentation that becomes devastating to their own case. The third category is recordings of household or interpersonal interactions that speak directly to the claims being made in the proceeding. In family cases specifically, these recordings are among the most powerful evidence available because they are virtually impossible to refute by characterization. An attorney can argue about the interpretation of a document. An attorney can challenge the credibility of a witness. It is much harder to argue against your own voice, your own words, in a context where you clearly did not expect to be heard by anyone who would ever matter legally. The fourth category, and this one is often overlooked in the way people think about family proceedings, is professional consultation documentation. Communications with attorneys, therapists, advisors, or other professionals that establish what a party knew, when they knew it, and what actions they chose to take or not take in response to that knowledge. This category of evidence is particularly significant because it goes directly to questions of intent and awareness. It is one thing to claim you did not know something. It is another thing entirely when the documentation shows that a professional told you exactly what you now claim not to have known, and you proceeded anyway. The fifth category is financial documentation and discussion recordings or communications that touch on financial decisions, financial control, financial access. This category matters in family proceedings because financial dynamics are often a significant part of the story being told, and financial communications, particularly informal ones, recorded in private, often reveal a picture of power and control that formal financial documents are designed to obscure. Now, I am not going to tell you which of these categories the evidence fell into, but I want you to sit with all 5 of them. I want you to think about the Duggar world, what you know about how it operated, what has been documented publicly, what has emerged over time about the dynamics inside that family structure. And I want you to think about which of those 5 categories, if introduced in a courtroom, would have produced exactly the kind of reaction that the entire internet witnessed and reacted to without understanding. Because I think that when you hold those 5 categories against everything that is publicly known about this case, one of them is going to land differently than the others. One of them is going to feel less like a hypothetical and more like an answer. And I want that to be your conclusion built on your understanding, not something I hand you pre-packaged. That is the difference between this channel and the ones that just give you the reaction. Let's talk now about what this moment meant for Kendra specifically. Not in the abstract, in the particular reality of her situation. She came from a world where the story about her life was told by other people, where the narrative was managed, where the image was curated and the public was given a version of reality that served someone else's purposes. That is the world of the show. That is the world of the Duggar brand. And for years, for the duration of that world's existence, Kendra existed inside it as a participant in a story she did not fully author. Then she entered a legal proceeding. And here is what a legal proceeding is. At its most fundamental, it is a process designed to establish truth. Not performed truthfully, not curated truth. Documented, evidenced, witnessed truth. It is a process where the story is supposed to be told, not by the most powerful person in the room, not by the most practiced performer, but by the evidence, by the record, by what actually happened as documented. For someone who had spent years inside a managed narrative, a legal proceeding where the evidence tells the story is not just a legal experience. It is something closer to a correction. It is the first environment where the version of reality that served the powerful is not automatically the version that wins, where documentation and evidence and the specific legal skills of an advocate can level a playing field that was never level before. And the viral moment, the moment that the internet turned into a reaction GIF, was the moment when that leveling became visible. That is what the internet was actually witnessing, even though it didn't know it. The expression on that attorney's face was the expression of someone encountering an environment where the old tools no longer worked, where the power of the narrative, the power of the brand, the power of a carefully managed public image ran directly into something that none of those things can defeat: documented evidence, properly submitted, strategically deployed. The internet laughed at the expression. The internet made memes. The internet had its moment of entertainment. What the internet missed was that it was watching something genuinely significant, a moment where truth, as a legal instrument, demonstrated its force, and Kendra was at the center of it. I think about what it must mean to have been in that room, in that moment, and then to watch it escape into public consciousness as a reaction clip. To have the most significant legal moment in your proceeding, the moment when everything you had been trying to document, everything your attorney had been building toward, everything you had waited for, to have that moment become content. To have the internet consume it without context and spit it back out as entertainment. That is a strange kind of injustice, not a legal injustice. The legal process at this moment appears to be working, but human injustice, a visibility injustice. The moment when you were finally legally witnessed in a way that mattered and the public turned it into a screenshot. This channel exists in part to undo that, to take the screenshot and put it back inside its context, to make the moment mean what it actually meant, rather than what the viral cycle made of it. Now let's zoom out for one moment because I want to give you a framework that you can apply not just to this case, but to any high-profile legal proceeding you follow in the future. Because you will follow others. These cases keep coming, and the pipeline we talked about at the beginning, the one that strips legal moments of their context before delivering them to your screen, is not going away. If anything, it is getting faster. The gap between a moment occurring in a courtroom and that moment becoming a viral clip is narrowing every year. The framework is this. When you see a courtroom moment that generates a strong public reaction, pause before you join the reaction. Ask yourself 4 questions. First, what was actually happening legally at this moment? Not what it looks like, not what does the expression suggest. What was the legal action being taken? What motion? What evidence? What procedural move? Second, whose strategy does this moment serve? Because in a legal proceeding, almost nothing of significance is accidental. If a moment produces a visible reaction from one side, the question is not just what caused the reaction, it is who designed the cause. Third, what was this moment building toward? The moment you see is almost never the beginning. It is almost always the result of preparation that began earlier, sometimes much earlier. The drama you see is the surface. The strategy beneath it is the story. And fourth, who is this moment being witnessed in service of? Because legal proceedings are, at their core, about people, about human beings trying to be seen and heard and believed inside a formal system. And the viral cycle that surrounds high-profile cases has a habit of consuming those human beings, turning them into characters in a story the internet is telling for its own entertainment. The fourth question asks you to resist that consumption, to remember that there is a person at the center of what you are watching. And that person's experience of being witnessed inside a legal system is not the same as being witnessed inside a viral moment. If you ask those 4 questions every time, you will never again react to a courtroom moment the way the internet reacts to it. You will see more, you will understand more, and I would argue you will be a fair witness to the people whose lives these proceedings are actually about. Now, I promised you before and after, and I want to hold to that because I think the shift that this video produces is something worth documenting. When you first saw that viral moment before you watched this video, you had a reaction. Maybe you laughed. Maybe you felt satisfaction. Maybe you felt something harder to name. Whatever your first reaction was, it was built on the surface, on the expression, on what the viral cycle handed you without context. Now you know what the expression meant. You know what was happening legally at that moment. You know about the 3 weeks of preparation that preceded it. You know about the 5 categories of evidence and what each one means in a proceeding like this. You know about the strategy of revealing the deliberate architecture of a moment designed to land exactly as hard as it landed. You know about what it means for Kendra to have that moment consumed by a public that missed everything significant about it. So I want to ask you genuinely, not as a content prompt, but as an actual question from someone who spent significant time building this analysis. Does the moment hit differently now? Is the expression more meaningful when you understand what it was responding to? Is the satisfaction if you felt it deeper or different in quality now that you understand it was not accidental? Because I think it is. I think understanding why something happened is always more powerful than simply reacting to the fact that it did. I think the second reaction, the one built on context, is more accurate, more empathetic, and more honest than the first one. And I think your second reaction to this moment is more truthful than anything the mainstream coverage produced. Drop your before and after in the comments below. What did you think when you first saw the viral clip? And what do you think now after this breakdown? I want to read them. I want to see the shift happen in real time in this comment section because I genuinely believe that the community that forms around this kind of analysis sees things more clearly than the internet's first take. Prove me right. Show me the before and after. And now the last thing I want to say before I let you go. This case is not over. The story of Kendra Duggar and what she has navigated, what she has documented, what she has fought to have witnessed inside a legal process is not a closed chapter. There are more hearings, more filings, more moments that will escape into public consciousness and travel through the pipeline and arrive at people's screens, stripped of the context that makes them meaningful. This channel will be here every time that happens. Every time a moment goes viral for the wrong reasons, we will go beneath it. Every time the internet reacts to the surface, we will go to the legal reality underneath. Every time a real person inside a real proceeding gets reduced to content, we will put them back inside their context and make the moment mean what it actually means. That is the commitment of this channel. That is why Jenny Exposes exists, not to expose people, but to expose the gap between what the public is shown and what is actually happening. To be the place where the gap closes. To be the channel where moments get their meaning back. If that is the kind of analysis you want, if you are tired of reaction content that leaves you entertained but uninformed, then this channel is your home. Subscribe right now. Hit the bell so you do not miss the next breakdown, because the next case is already developing, and when the viral moment hits, you are going to want the context before the internet hands you the reaction. Like this video. I know that sounds like a standard ask, but I want you to understand what it actually means. This kind of analysis takes time. It takes research. It takes going through legal frameworks and case dynamics and media coverage and human context and building something that is actually useful rather than just engaging. Your love is what makes that work viable. It is not a small thing. It is the thing that lets this channel keep going deep when every algorithm incentive is telling creators to stay on the surface. Share this video with everyone who shared the viral clip without the context, because they have seen half the story. This video is the other half. Give it to them. Let them have the before and after experience for themselves. And finally, drop that comment, the before and after. What you thought before this video and what you think now. Because the comment section of this channel is not a reaction section. It is an analysis section. It is where people who have done the work of actually understanding what they are watching come to share what they see. Be part of that. Add your voice to it. Everyone saw the moment. You now know what it meant. That is the difference between this channel and everywhere else. I'll see you in the next one.